Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by my co-host, David Heaney, broadcasting for us today from his PC in London, where we've got the UploadVR recording studios running in virtual reality. I'm wearing a Quest 3 headset with meta avatars and hand tracking to show off my finger movements, and we have an enormous show for you today discussing the next steps in personal computing. I'd like to send a sincere thank you to all of our members and patrons for your direct support of our work in journalism. You help us do what we do, and we're able to see your comments from YouTube on these tablets here as we talk through this news live with our audience. Hello to Ryan, Q Creator, Arlen, and Biggs, Davin, and German Rifter, and everyone else in our comments watching us out there today. Thank you for tuning in. David, what do we have?
We're going to have quite a big show today, a lot of topics. We're still in those months where companies are dropping news left, right, and center, and there are also some unexpected developments. So we'll start with three stories that are their own thing, not part of a category. Firstly, the news that you'll see at the front of UploadVR.com right now that Meta CTO has publicly apologized to Palmer Luckey over comments made about his firing, and Mark Zuckerberg praised Palmer Luckey and gave him a demo of the Orion AR glasses. So we'll talk about that and go into details there. We'll then talk about PlayStation VR 2 surging on Steam. It's now one of the top 10 most used VR headsets on Steam, following its PC adapter and driver releasing back in August. We'll then talk about the report that Samsung is working on a Ray-Ban Meta glasses competitor with Google Gemini AI. So Samsung and Google not just making a headset, as we already know, but also making smart glasses. We'll then move into a Meta Quest section. We'll talk about the crazy deal that Quest 3 Refurbished is $380, which we call the best deal in VR right now, and why we recommend picking that up over a Quest 3S if you can. We'll talk about some changes. Notice that Quest's Horizon OS now works better offline when you don't have an internet connection. We'll talk about the new Meta avatars, which we are not using, and we'll talk about that and whether any third-party apps are going to use it anytime soon. But they are available in Horizon Worlds, Home, Workrooms, and the SDK is out. We will then talk about Apple Vision Pro. We'll talk about the fact that AirPods 4 supports Apple Vision Pro's ultra-low latency lossless wireless audio protocol. So you don't need AirPods Pro for that anymore. We'll talk about the report that an Apple Vision Pro refresh with the M5 chip could enter mass production in late 2025. So around a year from now, we could be seeing a refresh of Vision Pro with dramatically improved computing power. We will talk about YouTube forcing the third-party client Juno off the Vision OS App Store. Juno, I'm sure a lot of Vision Pro owners, if there's any in the audience, are likely to have purchased Juno and will miss it. And we'll finish by talking about Microsoft. So there's two stories there. Firstly, Microsoft is discontinuing HoloLens 2. Production has ended with no replacement. And secondly, the latest major update to Windows 11 removes Windows Mixed Reality, meaning you can no longer use any of the Windows Mixed Reality headsets on that new version of Windows 11, not even on Steam. They are dead. They are effectively, in the context of a PC you've updated to the Windows 11 latest version, paperweight.
Yeah, big subjects, a lot for us to get through today. I want to say thank you to Davin's comments out here. I appreciated him calling out us defending the honor of virtual reality, so to speak, when it comes to field of view and all the discussions out there. There is a new wave of confusion caused by the demos last week and the terminology used to describe them by a variety of publications. And all our audience, they know that we've got the specs right. We understand the differences here, and we are doing our darndest to explain it to the people out there. I see Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop, in our audience. I always like to call you out and put you on notice that we're watching for your comments out there, Guy, to see what you say, as well as Ryan, one of our members here, and Biggs. Thank you again. David, why don't we move right into that first subject here as we get through this show as quickly as we can. Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth publicly apologizing to Palmer Luckey as Mark Zuckerberg praises Luckey's contributions to the space and gives him an Orion demo.
Yeah, so we'll start with some context here. I really recommend you go to uploadvr.com and click on the article for full context. But if you missed it back in April, and we covered this on this show and on uploadvr.com, Bosworth, the CTO of Meta, was publicly arguing with Palmer Luckey and John Carmack on X over the issue of Luckey's political views in relation to him being fired from Oculus by Facebook back in 2017. So that happened back in April. Bosworth called one of Carmack's comments woefully incorrect. And Luckey responded kind of, calling out Bosworth on some of the claims around there and pointing out that Bosworth wasn't there. There also was a take from the Erlang creator, Amanda Watson, who was there at the time, kind of coming to Carmack and Luckey's defense there. And then that kind of fizzled out when, after being called out on that, Bosworth eventually fell back to the claim that there were limits on what could be said in public. So now, 6 months later, Bosworth is actually apologizing to Palmer Luckey publicly for the statements that he made at the time around the firing. And I'll just read out sort of the main section of this apology. So he said, "I mentioned this in person, but I also wanted to publicly apologize for my previous comments about your time at then Oculus. I'm sorry. After reading the recent tablet piece, I dug into some of the events that preceded my time when a different set of people who are no longer at the company were running the group. It turns out I was misinformed, but that's no excuse. And since I wasn't involved, I should never have said anything. I'm grateful for the impact you've made to the company and in developing VR overall." So that's the main section of Bosworth's apology. And Palmer has accepted that apology and said, "Thanks, Bos. Apology accepted. I'm infamously good at holding grudges, but Meta has changed a lot over the past 8 years. The people responsible for my ouster and internal/external smear campaign aren't even around anymore. At some point, the ship of Theseus has sailed." And John Carmack weighed in saying that all of this made him happy. He's glad to see this happen. And just wants people to move on and talk about the work itself. And so, Palmer even expanded on his acceptance, saying, to Bosworth, "It's very rare for someone to demonstrate this sort of character." And the second part of this is the Mark Zuckerberg angle, where Mark Zuckerberg personally invited Luckey to demo the Orion AR glasses. That's what you can see on the left of the screen. This is obviously an image of all three people wearing Orion. And Luckey said that it was surreal to be back on the campus, and Orion alone was well worth the trip. It's more or less exactly what I would have wanted to accomplish. And so you'll notice that in Bosworth's apology, he mentions the start of this. What led him to look into what happened back then was a piece from Tablet. That's Tablet magazine. And in that same piece, it was a feature about Palmer Luckey's life and career, including at Oculus and now Anduril. Mark Zuckerberg actually gave a statement on Luckey. And this is really rare because normally when a magazine or outlet like this reaches out to Meta PR, you get either a non-comment or some PR person. But Mark Zuckerberg himself actually provided a statement to this magazine. And this is what he said. He said, "I have a huge amount of respect for Palmer, both for what he's done for VR and for now achieving the rare feat of building multiple successful companies. He's an impressive free thinker and fun to work with. I was sad when his time at Meta came to an end, but the silver lining is that his work at Anduril is going to be extremely important for our national security. I'm glad an entrepreneur of his caliber is working on these problems. I hope we can find ways to work together in the future."
Thank you to CJ for becoming a member during this show. Thank you. It means a ton to us. I want to talk about two comments here back to back. Quentin, another member, a longtime member of our show, making a comment here. The best result from this is not having to hear about this drama anymore. And then right before that, they said, "I got to be honest, I couldn't care less about Palmer Luckey. He made something great, but is absolutely irrelevant now." But I want to talk about the comment right before that from Steve Barr, saying, "With the IVAS project on shaky ground, perhaps Meta and Anduril could work together on Room AS next competition." I don't want to derail us, but that is an area we're going to be watching at uploadvr.com very, very closely, because for those that you aren't aware, the IVAS project is an augmentation project for the U.S. Army. It was originally headed up by HoloLens. It was a project that was being pursued by Microsoft with its HoloLens platform for the U.S. military. And there's debate with David and I discussing the possibility of the VR headset used in place of an AR headset for those conditions. The fail state of AR glasses that let you see through the optics is you still see through the optics to the environment around you, and the fail state of a VR headset is you see black if the power goes out or it stops working. Well, as David and I have discussed previously on the show, internally with ourselves, you can also just flip up a VR headset if that should happen. And there is a really, really interesting question to think about military use cases of VR and AR and which one is going to win out there. I'm just going to leave this subject with this question of outside of IVAS and outside of Orion that we saw here, I don't know of any other high profile AR projects that are in active development anymore. And so watching the IVAS and what happens with the U.S. Army's pipeline there of military equipment is going to be incredibly telling over the future of AR over the long term. So David, why don't you take it from there?
Yes, so just to be clear, Microsoft is still the sole hardware contractor for IVAS. It's not a past tense thing. They're still there. They're developing it. This is the latest version you can see on screen. Um, the US Army plans to do a company level operational test of IVAS in 2025. The difference recently, which relates to Palmer Luckey actually, is that his company, Anduril, is actually now being contracted to provide software that runs on this militarized HoloLens. We will talk more about HoloLens near the end of the show when we talk about Microsoft, but the context here is that Luckey's company is directly involved in AR in this sense, in that they're providing software that will provide battle space visualization. So soldiers will be able to see, video game style icons above friendly and enemy assets on the battlefield. And so that's, a situational awareness thing there. But I think you're right to say, and we'll talk more when we talk about HoloLens later, that the HoloLens IVAS project and Orion seem to be the only major transparent AR projects that we're currently aware of that are not past tense.
Yeah, not past tense. I think we can probably move on here from this subject. I appreciate our commenter saying they don't tune into this show for this discussion, but it's part of the world we live in, and it is going to shape the world we live in as much as the consumer products are going to shape the world we live in. So we're going to keep following it and keep that in mind as well, that this is a very consumer-oriented audience and interested in. No, I just disconnected. Am I still?
You seem to be cutting out there, Ian. Your connection seems to be.
Let me restart. I'll be back in a minute.
Sure. Yeah, the last thing I would say on this topic, James O'Loughlin's right to point out we've forgotten Snap Spectacles. Snap Spectacles is, of course, the other massive transparent AR project. And no promises, but you may be seeing some impressions of Snap Spectacles from me in the next week or so. So keep on UploadVR.com for that. I'm just going to look at some of the comments here. The thing I really find fascinating about this topic, this story, is Zuckerberg's statement that he hopes he can find ways to work together with Palmer Luckey in the future. It really does make me wonder, is there a day in the 2030s when Palmer Luckey returns to Meta? It sounds crazy, but so would saying that the CTO of Meta would apologize to Luckey 7 years ago when Luckey was fired, and so would Mark Zuckerberg making these kind of statements about Luckey. And what else would sound crazy is if you were in the late 1980s or early 1990s and said that Steve Jobs would return to Apple someday. That would have seemed to a lot of people crazy. So, never say never. We could find some very strange things happen in the 2030s.
All right. Am I back? And do I still sound like a robot? How am I doing, David?
You sound fine now. I think you sound fine.
All right. Well, where are we in this lineup? Are we ready to talk about PlayStation VR 2 here?
Yeah, we can talk about that PlayStation VR 2 news. So it's really surged on the Steam hardware survey. Um, Obviously, the PC adapter and driver debuted in August, and so many people's wouldn't have arrived back then. A lot of people wouldn't have set theirs up. So it was only 0.05% of Steam VR usage in August. But in September, the latest data that's just come in, it surged up 0.9%, which is very impressive. That's equivalent to, we estimate, around 50,000 people. And yeah, you can see that that brings it in to the top 10 here. So more popular than Quest Pro, the original Quest, and both HTC Vive Pros, even summed the Vive Pros, but it's not quite yet at the level of Pico 4 or the Rift or Windows Mixed Reality, which we will talk about near the end of the show, or these. But I could see this increasing, right? If Sony can keep the pace up here, we could definitely see this become one of the top five over the next few months. Another thing that we expect is that if Sony is able to bring some of the missing features, that would make this a lot more appealing as a PC VR headset, right? If you're not aware, high dynamic range, eye tracking, and head rumble are not available on PC. Those only work when you connect this headset to PlayStation 5. So if they were able to bring those over to PC, eye tracking is the flagship feature there that I think a lot of people would hope for. You could see this thing really becoming one of the major PC VR headset players. And we talked recently on this show a few weeks ago about how Sony had fixed some of the launch bugs there. They'd fixed this warping issue we were having. They'd polished up some issues with AMD users not being able to toggle the refresh rate. TP-Link released a firmware update for one of their Bluetooth USB adapters that made the Sense controllers laggy. Before the update, they were a bit laggy. And yeah, it's really stunning the colors and contrast you get out of this thing on PC. And I've seen a lot of feedback in our comments, in our DMs, in the emails we get about people saying that using PlayStation VR and PlayStation VR 2 on PC has really made them lament the LCD era that we're still in for mainstream VR headsets. Those colors are just beyond anything. But of course, that comes with some major trade-offs in PSVR 2's case, like the softness and the noise you get, the Mura pattern across the image. So this is really a unique PC headset, and we're seeing people pick up on that.
I don't know if we talked about it while I was gone or whatever, but I do want to call out Guy Godin's comment here on the previous subject of just the idea of Palmer Luckey buying back the Oculus name from Meta. I think that's an interesting idea to think about. There was a lot of love for that name, and to see it disappear was pretty hard, I think, for fans out there. And so interesting, it's interesting to imagine those parties getting together just on the name alone to help sort everything out. This, David, PSVR 2 hitting 2.9%. I would not be surprised to see it go under Valve Index pretty quickly. You've got HTC Vive, Windows Mixed Reality, which we'll discuss later in the show, that represents 3.55% of this hardware survey. The Oculus Rift from 2016. These headsets haven't been sold in years, and all of them. It's kind of remarkable, right? When you think about that, you add up all these numbers, 10, you get to 15, 18, almost a fifth of the whole hardware survey is represented here in headsets that are PC only and have not been on sale for years. I think that says something remarkable about the staying power of PC VR. The people who use these systems to come back into their favorite VR projects on PC again and again and again. And here we have Sony PSVR 2, which is on the market almost in a like a category by itself now, because of all of these other things being abandoned. So I would not be surprised to see Sony make a quite a large leap up this list in the next few months. And like, as you've mentioned, if the software platform more fully fleshes out what PSVR 2 does, it'll be a big difference. So anything else you want to talk about here before we move on?
Yeah, we're just seeing multiple people in the comments point out just how beautiful, in Ryan B words, for example, in Ryan B's words, for example, the PlayStation VR2 image can be in terms of contrast and colors. If you look at these headsets, what I really see here is that the only OLED headsets above it are the original Vive and Rift from 2016, which are obviously woefully outdated when it comes to resolution. So unless you are spending literally thousands of dollars on a big screen beyond and all of the accessories that it requires, or an Apple Vision Pro or something like that, the only way to get that true deep black and that true uh, punchy colors that don't look washed out is through PlayStation VR2. And so, yeah, it'll be very, very fascinating to see how that changes over time.
Yeah, I think we're probably ready to move on here pretty quickly because we've got to move through this lineup as fast as we can today. Let's talk about Samsung reportedly working on Ray-Ban Meta glasses competitor that would be powered by Google's Gemini AI. A lot of things to consider here, and we probably will meander after you get through this. Why don't you break this down for us, David?
Yeah, so this comes from the information, a very reliable outlet that is being reliable time and time again about Meta and Apple and Google, and we've followed a lot of their reporting for years to find out things years in advance. This follows other reporting from The Verge that Google originally was hoping to, in The Verge words, steal the Ray-Ban partnership off Meta so that they could get Ray-Ban Gemini glasses out there, or Ray-Ban Google, whatever they would call them, that runs their Gemini AI. And recently we saw Essilor-Luxottica, the owner of Ray-Ban and Oakley and all these other brands that has like an almost near monopoly on eyewear worldwide, sign a new agreement with Meta that extends into the 2030s for future smart glasses. And Meta has also reportedly taken a stake in Essilor-Luxottica alongside that. So it looks like Google has not succeeded in that attempt, and instead they are now partnering with Samsung for Samsung to do the hardware. We actually saw a trademark last year from Samsung of Samsung glasses, so it looks like they could be called, Samsung Gemini glasses, Samsung Google glasses, or Samsung glasses with Gemini. We don't know what the branding would be, but the concept is simple, right? It's the same pitch as Ray-Ban Meta, but with Gemini instead of Meta AI. I think the obvious thing to point out here is that they're going to have more difficulty selling this from a fashion perspective if it's coming from a tech company like Samsung than Meta and Ray-Ban are, given that Ray-Ban is, a fashion cultural phenomenon. So that's going to be a challenge. They reportedly, Samsung and Google, are looking into doing like a celebrity marketing campaign, but we've seen time and time again that these tech companies are not great at transitioning from tech to fashion, and only Apple has really kind of sort of done that through its sheer force, and Samsung really hasn't achieved that yet.
Yeah, good breakdown there. The meandering bit of this discussion that I expected us to have is going to be in this area between these smart glasses, AI powered with cameras on them, and fully AR see-through optics that we expect to be quite a long ways out. We've had uh, all the write-ups out there about the Orion glasses at 70 degrees field of view and the extraordinary cost involved in actually putting a display into that form factor, right? That is all pushing back the thousands of dollars it's going to cost to go and buy those types of glasses is all going to be pushing against the idea that what if your glasses just have a camera on them that feed information to your phone and then tell you in your ears what it sees. And Meta is pointing out that that is probably a very, very big product category for them, having been proven out by the Ray-Ban glasses. But what we deal with, it's just going to make it uglier next year, is all the confusion about what those smart glasses do compared to what Zuckerberg just showed off on stage. And like Google, Samsung, like I always imagine these marketing people getting into a room and just going, I want a clean slate. I'm going to call it whatever the hell I want to call it. And they go through the dictionary and they put up on their board a whole bunch of like ideas, and they're like, that's the term I want. Okay, I need to talk about this again. My tracking is still messed up, David. Like it's still centering my tracking in a really odd way. Like it's centering my tracking on my hand movements or something, and it's killing me. I don't understand why this is happening. All right, I'm sorry. David, what else do we got here?
Yeah, this is a strange one. My tracking seems fine. I'm not sure what's going on there. So the other thing I would say about this is that this report describes some very interesting debates within Google about exactly what you were saying. Should they go with simple smart glasses or should they go with full AR glasses? And that debate apparently played out over years. And in the end, the simple smart glasses faction won. And apparently that led to some of the people who wanted to build full AR glasses at Google actually leaving the company for guess who? Meta. We've seen this time and time again, where when Google canned Daydream, their standalone VR platform that launched at the same time as Oculus Go back in 2018, Google canned it a year and a half or so later. A bunch of people from the Daydream team went off to Meta because Meta actually wanted to, keep building out the Quest line and, released Quest 2 and Quest 3 now and Quest 3S. So yeah, this is, we're seeing in the comments, people say that this is classic Google. Why not do both? It does look like they are trying to focus specifically for now on these smart glasses with a long-term plan, apparently, to build the software for AR glasses. But right now, headset on one end and smart glasses on the other end. That headset being the Samsung mixed reality headset that we talked about last week, I think, or it might have been the week before, has apparently been pushed later out into 2025.
All right. Well, I think it's probably good time now to move on to the MetaQuest section of our show here. That is probably what a lot of our people are curious about, given that it's the market leader right now and they have the 3S coming right around the corner. A lot of people are going to be curious about that. David, why don't you start us off with what our MetaQuest section is here? You pointed this deal out, and it is a good deal, is it not?
Yeah, so right now, Meta is obviously doing a clearance sale on new Quest 3 128 gigabyte model for $430, which is 130 more than getting a new Quest 3S of the same storage. But what not everyone has noticed is that they are also actually selling refurbished 128 gigabyte Quest 3s for just 380. So for only $80 more than a new Quest 3S, you can get a full Quest 3. And that obviously brings you the pancake lenses, the biggest difference by far, precise IPD adjustment, not just 3 steps, higher resolution, dual panels, a better build quality, a headphone jack, and a thinner headset that has a better center of gravity so it feels lighter on your face. So unless you're someone who is vehemently against the idea of a refurbished product, then this is a better deal than getting a new Quest 3S. Until these things run out, these refurb Quest 3s, I would very much so recommend jumping on this. And to be clear, this is not from a third party. This is a certified refurbished direct Meta Store first party refurb that has the same warranty and guarantee and support as buying a new headset. It doesn't have any differences in that sense. The one thing that we have reached out to Meta to clarify is does the refurb Quest 3 also come with Batman? We haven't yet received a response on that, but we will try to get that to you as soon as Meta replies to us on that question. But in general, just to completely underscore this, $80 more than a Quest 3S, you can get a refurb Quest 3.
Yep. I figured out my problem. It was travel mode. Yeah, I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know how to turn travel mode off in my menu, and yeah, that was just screwing up my entire tracking. So my world is now anchored to the world in a proper way. That's a big deal. A lot of people are going to be looking for us to break down the differences between 3S and 3. I did try 3S at MetaConnect last week, and it felt exactly like we expected it to, right between a 2 and a 3 in terms of capabilities. But they didn't give me a huge number of apps to test in. And I was using like the action button to mess with that. We're going to need to watch really closely and really investigate the hand tracking on the 3S as soon as we get that extended time with it to compare what the 3S is capable of to the 3. Um, we ready to talk about the Horizon OS, or is there anything you want to talk about in the comments here?
I'd just say that, yeah, we do plan to, as always, have a Quest 3S review. We cannot give you a timeline for that, but we will dig into all the differences. But as Ian said, if you've used a Quest 2 and a Quest 3, you know what the Quest 3S is. It's Quest 2's displays and lenses with the Quest 3's chipset and pass-through capabilities. And there will be some other minor differences that we dig into in our review.
We saw the question about when we're going to switch over to the meta
we'll have a meta
avatars.
avatar section.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that then.
So we'll talk about that. But first up, we've got Quest's Horizon OS now working better offline. David, why don't you just break that down real quick?
Yeah, this is a relatively minor story, but if you use Quest headsets without an internet connection, in the past, you might have noticed that there were some major issues. For example, the app icons in your library were all blank because they load them in each time from the web. Well, now they've implemented something that is a standard feature of every operating system I can think of, app icon caching. So they store the app icons locally. They also have a nice feature now where they will gray out apps that require an internet connection. So you can easily see in your library which will work when you're offline. And if you try to launch one that requires an internet connection, it will bring you to the Wi-Fi settings screen. So this is not an amazing difference, but it is important if you are someone who does use these headsets offline frequently. You're on a flight, you're traveling on a train, or you use them like at hotels with bad internet, or just for whatever reason you have to be offline with these headsets. These kind of small changes are an improvement. As I said, this is something that's standard in pretty much every other OS forever.
I'm looking at this comment from Thomas Van Bowel. I want to call him out. That is the developer of Laserdance, right? And Laserdance is an incredible mixed reality experience, and I'm currently trying to work on a piece here talking about the current problems that I'm hearing across the board from mixed reality developers, both working with Apple Vision Pro and Meta Quest 3, as trying to get their games to actually use the entire physical volume that you have around you, the physical room space, as props for your VR experience. And it's actually sounding like devs are hitting a bit of a wall, because even a couple millimeters of drift is enough to put objects that need to be hanging on a wall inside the wall. Well, I think Meta and Apple probably think they have sight lines to correcting that and having those walls be solid and having mixed reality experiences that really do use your whole environment. But it is coming at the extraordinary frustration of devs out there and the gamers who are trying to play those games. And it is something we're actively watching and trying to get out in front of our readers because of that situation. But I just wanted to call that out because Laserdance is an incredible experience, and I cannot wait for it to actually hit the market, because it is such a great thing. And you've got that dev here in our audience. So thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, it's an interesting issue. There does appear to be a feature of the new version of Meta's mixed reality utility kit that is aimed at fixing some of those issues, but we'll definitely dig into that at a later date. So if anyone's curious about this incredibly minor library change, here's what it looks like when you're offline. So anything that requires the internet is grayed out. Groundbreaking stuff with the sarcasm indicator. So
I liked it. We got the sarcasm in our comments too. It's just like, oh, thanks Meta for getting to the feature we've had for about 15 years on every other platform.
Yeah, I guess the last thing we could say on this is just that this is all part of like a slow and gradual process of Meta trying to build up its own platform, right? When Apple's building Vision OS, it built Vision OS based on iPad OS. So a lot of the basics were already there. They're just bringing that into a spatial context. Meta is building on AOSP, the open source core of Android, which doesn't have a lot of the features that exist in your Android phone, because those are added on by Google or by Samsung in all of their software. And so when Google comes out with Android XR, that will build on all of the stuff that they've already built for their Google-ified version of Android, as well as probably some of their Pixel features as well, whereas Meta is doing all this from scratch. So yes, there obviously is, it's completely right to dunk on Meta for not having a lot of these basic features, but at the same time, there is a massive, massive difference between using a Quest headset 2 or 3 years ago as a general device, a general computing device. And now all of these little features are getting added in one by one over time. And it will be fascinating to see what state is Horizon OS in 2, 3, 5 years from now in comparison to its competitors.
Yep, Arlen calling out entrapment with Catherine Zeta-Jones sliding through the you all remember the scene. It's all buried in your brains, right? You remember that trailer 30 years later, 25 years later, of exactly what Catherine Zeta-Jones does to get through that laser maze, and that is exactly what they're building with Laser Dance, an app that expands to your room and forms to the space, and it is a remarkable piece of software that really does represent the next cutting edge. So very, very, very exciting to see that come together, and I want to call it out again. Let's talk about this last subject on MetaQuest subjects before we get on to the Apple Vision Pro section. So this is the one that is near and dear to your heart, David. You watch and work with avatars constantly. In particular, this is a joke on our show where I try not to show that I don't have legs here because it is so jarring for our audience here. And you'll notice that David carefully equipped our tablets here to cut us off right at the area where you can't be disturbed by our shocking lack of a bottom half. And we're going to have to change those avatars up very, very soon because of this new news. So David, why don't you break it down?
Yeah, I guess it depends how you define soon there. I wouldn't say very, very soon, but yeah, the new meta avatars are out. They are live in Horizon Worlds, Horizon Home, and Horizon Workrooms, Meta's first party app, and the SDK is out for third-party developers. So current apps that use that SDK include Golf Plus, 11 Table Tennis, Drop Dead, The Cabin, and on screen here you can see some before and afters from some Quest users that have shared this on social media. And one of the features for the SDK for third-party apps is animated legs. So the old avatars have had animated legs in Meta's first-party apps for around a year now, right? Horizon World, Horizon Home, they both have had legs on the old avatars for a year. But the third-party SDK didn't have animated legs. You could add legs, and if you wanted, you could animate them yourself. But that wasn't offered as part of the SDK. The new SDK has that by default, and in fact, you cannot have a legless instantiation of the avatars anymore in third person. The new version of Meta Avatars in the SDK is full body only, and that's obviously a major change there. So expect when eventually apps update to support it, that you will see legs in all of those apps. The deadline for that is March 30th. So the old avatars will no longer load in apps that use the current Avatar SDK, the old Avatar SDK, by March 30th. So Golf Plus, 11 Table Tennis, Drop Dead The Cabin, and UploadVR Studios all have until March 30th to update. And when it comes to our specific application in general, we have by March 30th. Unfortunately, we just don't get much time to work on this. We are pretty much flat out these days on writing articles, on keeping up with news, on doing all the background research and context and speaking to developers and sources to bring up our articles. The pace of news in this industry is absolutely enormous for the size of team we are. And I don't know when we're going to get time to add the new avatars into the studio. To be frank with you, it completely depends. Do we get a week where there isn't 5 news stories breaking every day? At least.
Yeah, I appreciate that context, and our audience feels for you. They knew what was coming before you even said it, and yeah, it's a very, very, very difficult sort of balance to do because we know our audience, like they're gonna that's a reason for them to tune in even more than they normally tune in to see that changeover in us, right? Like that's a big moment for them as viewers, for us as people actually coming into the space to have to get used to those new avatars, right? We had old avatars that we use. I can't go back and watch those episodes because of how dramatically upgraded this new system was and how much you've done to tune it. And I'm curious if that will happen again when we transition to the new avatars. If it's going to be hard to go back and watch what, three years of episodes or something like that with these avatars. I want to mention VR Gamer Dude trying to get his embodiment right. That's Don Hopper out there. He immediately installed the new avatars, and they did not look like him. There was a big gap between what he was trying to get out of the avatars and what he actually looks like. So I don't know if that's more tweaking required to get the avatars to represent more time in the bodies to feel like it's part of you. I don't know, but not great first impressions, at least from what I saw out of Don's avatar.
Yeah, it's interesting that some people seem to really like this, and some people say, I don't like this. There's mixed reception that I've seen on social media. I've been looking at some of the Horizon Worlds communities and just general Quest users posting on different social media. As Wabo points out in the comments here, what matters far more than a screenshot and the thumbnail you get in the phone app or whatever is how these avatars look in motion. And that's something that we'll be closely tracking because, I will sound like a broken record on this. If you watch this show, you'll have heard me say this many, many times over. But what matters for a VR avatar system is how it looks in motion, animated by direct hardware tracking. It doesn't matter what it looks like in a screenshot. So one of the things I think is actually good about these old avatars that we're using right now is that they do punch above their appearance when it comes to how well they translate tracking motion into facial animation and general motion. So we'll be paying attention to that in general. And yeah, I'm just looking at some of the comments.
I like Blair's comment there. Yeah. I mean, they've only had 10 years. Give them time. Fair sort of like long view, but also like you're representing human bodies. I mean, that isn't an easy thing to figure out for everyone. So I guess I understand it. At the same time, it's a fair comment to make as well. Are we ready to move on to Apple Vision Pro?
Just having a look at some of the comments here. VR Gamer Dude asking about the facial animation. So I did actually see a Quest Pro user. I unfortunately, my Quest Pro is sitting with its battery dead, packed in a box, but I'm going to get it out soon to have a look at this. Actually, we did see some Quest Pro users post on social media showing that these do support face tracking and eye tracking, and they actually look better than the old avatars because the old avatars are a little bit too simple in that sense to really translate through a human scale. Face tracking and eye tracking. One of the things about these new avatars that you can clearly see, regardless of the visual improvements, is that the proportions are clearly much more human now, right? The size of the head and other body parts relative to each other look much more close to realism, and that means that when you're translating real-time tracking, including body tracking and face tracking, that should look a little bit more natural. People in the comments are pointing out that this is probably like version 5 or 6 of the avatars from Oculus/Meta, and that's very, very true. There have been a bunch of different avatar systems, and they've gone through a lot of trial and error here. If you remember back on the original Rift, there were these avatars that were just like 1 or 2 simple colors. They didn't have any face or eyes. You had to put on a pair of eyewear. That's how they avoided the eye problem completely. And so, yeah, we're a long way from that, but we're obviously still also a long way in the other direction away from Meta's research, the codec avatars. And people are asking here in the comments, where do we think this is on the scale of getting there? And the thing that I picked up from some of Mark Zuckerberg's interviews about this is that I don't think there's actually going to be a time when these meta avatars get updated into codec avatars. I think these are actually going to be separate things. You will have your expressive avatar, is Zuckerberg's words for these cartoonish avatars, and then you'll have your codec avatar separately. And one of the reasons for that is that the codec avatar will be a lot more computationally intensive to render. So if you're in a small scale app where you're with 2 or 3 other people in a small room, maybe Horizon workrooms or something like that, you may have your codec avatar, 3 or 5 years down the line or whenever, I don't know. But then if you go into Horizon Worlds or something else where you have 15 or 30 or 50 people around you, you will be your expressive avatar going throughout a different world. So I think these things will actually coexist for different use cases.
Yeah, and there is a really interesting avenue to think about long term when it comes to bandwidth and bandwidth usage. It takes quite, it takes a large amount of bandwidth to send a full video frame stream at 30, 60 frames per second, whatever it is, over the internet in a consistent way across any internet connection whatsoever. If you can reduce that to just a voice stream, as well as the positions of hands and face movements, and use AI and the system to fill in all the gaps. You can imagine a situation like maybe I'm here in this studio as an avatar for all of you, but I'm not wearing a headset. I'm using a phone pointed at my face to animate this avatar for all of you as if I was. And you can imagine like maybe somehow getting to this situation where like that's the first few minutes of this show is I'm talking to you from a phone, and then I put the phone down, I put the headset on, and boom, you get a whole bunch more of me and my actual hand movements all coming across at you. It's there's a comment here saying they see line of sight in these new avatars, two codec avatars, the super hyper photorealistic. And I'm just gonna mention this. I don't think photorealism works as a term anymore. It falls flat. Because you can have avatars that look photorealistic, but to David's point, the moment you see them animated or move inside VR, they fall flat. They don't work. And so we need new ways to understand how these avatars feel and look.
That's a very good point. A new word is probably needed there, video realistic or something. Obviously that's a silly proposal, but you do need a different term to talk about not just something that looks great in a screenshot, because it's not that hard to make a virtual character that looks completely realistic in a screenshot. But as Ian points out, we've actually seen people do experiments with this with, for example, the metahumans in Unreal Engine. As soon as you actually see them start moving based on a VR headset's hand and head and face tracking, they look awful. They look absolutely terrible, as if someone's made a person out of paper mache and they're kind of like using strings to move them about. And that is such an important point to point out here.
Ego realism. I'm going to go with ego realism, but I also see the people like video realistic, motion realistic, one-to-one realism. Everyone's on board with us tossing out the photorealism idea here. Any comments you want to get into before we move on?
Yeah, just a few questions here. We have a Loco Freeman asking whether the new avatars auto convert. So the answer to that is that if you go into the phone app or your headset settings, you will be offered to convert your avatar, and it will go through a little animation to it converting. And I think they're here about use a smartphone to scan your face and have that automatically create an avatar like we see in Ready Player Me and some other avatar systems. I would love that. Personally, I hate create a character in video games and here. I'm not an artist. I don't know how to make it look like me half the time. I really dislike it. I don't want to sit there with a bunch of sliders. I know there are some people who absolutely love this. And I know game developers have the statistics to show that there are some people who will spend an hour in the character creator for each video game. I don't want that. I just want to take a picture of my face and have it automatically do it for me.
Yeah, some people saying you went robot there. But I wanted to talk about, what was it, one comment here. Where was it? Some just really interesting discussion here about the limitations of avatars and where we can go from here. The idea I was going to throw out there is there's research on the usefulness of a mirror. If you go into most apps now, like there's a mirror in your home space in the Quest ecosystem, and then if you go into settings with the Apple Vision Pro, you can get a mirror of your persona. And as I recall, I'm digging back into my deep memory banks here, so I could misconstrue this, but number one, the mirror helps you feel like you're actually inside the headset. I think it's an enhancement to the sense that you're present inside space. But also, they've done experiments where you represent yourself, say, as a 20-year older person than you actually are, and then asked you to do a quiz after you saw yourself as that representation who is much older in that mirror. And they found some really interesting things that when you do that one-to-one interaction with yourself, visualized as if you're much older, you might actually start thinking about the long-term effects of whatever, whether it's like saving money or health effects on your body of certain behaviors, you start thinking about that thing simply because the mirror over there showed you yourself imagined as it would be 20 years from now. So like grayer hairs or whatever. I could be misremembering that, but I wanted to give that context because I think Stanford did that research a while back.
Yeah, interesting stuff. There is a mirror in Horizon Home, the VR Home and Quest. I would like to see there be a physical spatial mirror, a mirror in the pass-through version, right? Let me bring a full body mirror into my space and see myself as an avatar. Obviously, that wouldn't work for the pass-through itself, but at least you could have like a reflective effect that makes it, look kind of cool. I just want to say again on the idea of taking a picture of your face and having the mobile app automatically generate an avatar. This is something Facebook had in a previous VR app, Facebook Spaces. That's actually how it used to work. And I'm really stunned that this wasn't announced to Connect, right? They have, they say that next year they're going to add a feature where you can type in what outfit you want your avatar to wear, and generative AI will generate an outfit for you. It just seems if you have that technology, surely you have the technology to make my avatar based on a picture of my face, right? Like, I wonder if that's actually some decision about privacy or something, because it like clearly this company has the technology to do this. It's not some science fiction idea.
It's interesting people bringing up the animal avatars in VR being a leader in this space, and I do want to throw out the opposite idea, right? There are VR devs who specifically opt not to represent you at all. You are an invisible person inside VR, or you're a blob. You could be anything. And you don't want to stop those devs from exploring those avenues either. So it's just fascinating, the full range of situations you can have out there. Let's move on to Apple Vision Pro here.
Actually, on that last thing, there is something we should say about this avatar system, which is that in Horizon Worlds, for now, they haven't said if this will come to other apps of the SDK. Meta is actually finally starting to budge on this idea of non-human forms. Still humanoid, but non-human. And that's something that people obviously love in VR chat. A lot of VR chat people will always chime in on these conversations and say, I don't want to look like a human. I don't even want to look like myself or anyone. I want to be a different creature. And so Meta did tease at Connect. Fantastical avatars is their name for it, that you'll be able to use within Horizon Worlds. And I think these are going to be unlockables in certain cases. You complete a quest or you go to a certain event and you get these, and they essentially look like kind of costumes that you're wearing. So it'll be interesting to see, do those transfer to the SDK? If I put on one of these fantastical avatars in Horizon Worlds and jump in here, am I still in it? Or is that something they're keeping in Horizon Worlds for now? We don't know the answer to those questions yet.
Our audience is going right off the deep end there on all the things they want to be. I'll throw out a camera. A camera is what I want to be represented as inside VR. I like that idea because it sends the signal that I might be recording, which I'm a reporter. That's why I go into virtual spaces a lot of the time, is to report on something. And it would be so useful if I could signal to everyone around me that I am a camera right now because I'm recording. And that's even another option to do.
That actually makes me think they should have an API that tells developers when the user is recording. There's multiple uses for that, right? You can do something like bring down the render resolution so things stay a bit smoother. But in multiplayer situations, you could imagine putting a camera on the player's head, like a giant hat with a camera on it in the classic jokingly recording a movie style. Or you could do, put on Ray-Ban meta glasses on them and have the little light come on in a homage to their real world solution for this. That would be something that's interesting. I think for this image specifically, that this is quite a low resolution image, so we're not really seeing the details of this, for some people pointing out kind of quality issues that they haven't shown this off properly yet. But I think, as you say, Ian, as you keep saying, it is time to move on to Apple Vision Pro section of the news.
So if you can't afford an Apple Vision Pro, just bear with us here as we move through this section. This is a big bet from Apple on the future of spatial computing, that they see a very long, big area to unlock with its product lines. And even if you're not in the market for this product right now, you still need to kind of be aware of what's going on in this region, because Meta is going to be watching it, as well as Google and everyone else. So it's very valuable, even if you're not in the market for these products, to understand what is going on in this area. So AirPods 4, what are you reading in the tea leaves here on the AirPods 4, David?
Sure. So if you're not aware, since launch, Apple Vision Pro has had this custom 20-bit 48 kilohertz wireless audio protocol, which has lossless compression and ultra low latency. So this is the only Apple product that you can actually have lossless wireless Bluetooth audio in. And it is achieved through this custom protocol. Until now, that has only been possible through AirPods Pro 2 with USB-C, which is kind of like AirPods Pro 2.5, and that's a $250 product. So if you wanted private, as in not coming out of these audio pods for the people around you, high quality, low latency audio and Vision Pro, you had to fork out that $250 or own that product already. Well, now they have added support for this to the AirPods 4 that just came out, and they are starting at $130. So that's a reduction in the cost of private, spatial, low latency, lossless audio for Apple Vision headsets going forward. So it looks like this is going to be just a standard on Apple audio devices going forward. I always find it very funny how Apple is so, what's the word here, careful about which audio devices they let use, that if you want to use something that isn't certified by them, say you have Pixel Buds or just any other Bluetooth audio, you go into Bluetooth devices on this thing and they're not there. You have to go into accessibility and hearing devices and pair them as an accessibility device. So there are obviously justified reasons behind that. The regular latency of Bluetooth audio breaks spatial audio. It kills the effect because there's so much delay. Also, you have the compression that brings down the audio quality, but that's not as important as the fact that it kills the spatial audio. So yeah, it's nice to see the cost of this come down.
Alexi saying a camera attached to an AirPod will beat the Meta Ray-Bans. So that is an area that we will consider and think about. It's a big opportunity for Apple. And also, I would flip that and also say that the cameras could be an opportunity for Apple. However, I will point out that there was that very alarming video that went around yesterday, and we're looking into it. I've reached out to the creators of that project, but this was a project that showed the way the videos captured on the Meta Ray-Ban glasses could be used to essentially dox people and get all of their personal information very quickly while actually in the real world with them. And it's extremely alarming to think about or to see that behavior out in the real world, but it's also like a wake-up call for a lot of people that is entirely feasible with these technologies. And it's one of these things that I've been thinking about this entire time that these Meta Ray-Ban glasses have been out. If there's a public outcry or if there's a turn of a creep factor happen with the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, I see this drying up very quickly, this idea of wearing cameras out in public. But that is a very, very big if, right? It could always go the other way. People get comfortable with these things over time. It's actually one of those questions I put to Andrew Bosworth a while back. Like, do you just expect people to get used to this? Like, that was one of the questions I have just broadly long term. What is it like to capture media in public with a little itty bitty light in the corner of your vision? And then what's so interesting to think about the AirPods example that the commenter just wrote about. What if the AirPods aren't actually capturing any media? What if the cameras on the AirPods are simply just analyzing your environment and it's all Apple doing the analysis, but you as the user aren't doing any capture?
Yeah, I mean, I remain extremely skeptical of these rumors of AirPods with a camera. I mean, from a simple like physics perspective, the size of a lens that you get on these things and the quality of capture would be pretty awful. So it wouldn't, as you say, be suitable for capture. You could just do image analysis, but even then, it's for a lot of people's hairstyles and face shapes. This is going to be far from the ideal way. I wonder if these rumors are actually getting confused in with Apple just building a Ray-Ban Meta glasses competitor, Apple glasses that are, the same thing we talked about earlier of Samsung and Google doing. And because they're in the same wearables category, people are looking into something and saying, oh, look, Apple's wearables category is experimenting with adding cameras. So that must be for AirPods. When in reality, I could easily see this being the glasses. I don't see putting cameras on earbuds making any sense. But I'm sure if I'm wrong about that, people will clip this out and bring it back to me. So
that would be me. That would be me. I'll be
yeah.
doing it, David.
I mean, no. cameras in your earbuds, really? I mean, even from like a battery and processing perspective, it just seems outlandish to me. So people in the comments are asking in relation to this Bluetooth low latency audio thing, ultra low latency audio, that Meta said that the Quest line will receive an update to Android 14 soon that will decrease the latency of Bluetooth. And they're asking how that compares. They're talking about taking it from terrible to not horrible, right? There's the standard Bluetooth audio protocols are still way, way too high. You're talking like 80 plus milliseconds, whereas we don't have hard numbers on Apple's custom protocol here, but there's speculation that it's below 20 milliseconds. So right now, even if you use one of the Qualcomm low latency audio protocols, or there's like an open one, ALLM, I believe it's called, you're still talking like 30 to 40 milliseconds of latency, and that's the absolute best you can get. So you're still talking like 3 or so frames of audio latency. Whereas this custom protocol that Apple have built, again, it's only for Vision Pro, is delivering like sub 20, maybe even less than that. The reason that this is technically a lot easier to do on a headset than a general device is quite obvious, right? Because the distance this signal is traveling is tiny. The idea of doing this for general Bluetooth devices where your phone's on the other side of the room, or even you're walking throughout your house, that's going to be a lot more challenging. I would be very interested to see if Meta decide to do something around this, given that they've taken the headphone jack out of Quest 3S. We might see Meta Buds someday that pair to the Ray-Ban glasses and your Quest headset and do the same thing, this custom audio protocol. Because Meta's no stranger to custom wireless protocols, right? Their touch controllers use a custom wireless protocol. The Orion glasses, they developed a custom wireless protocol for. They are no strangers to doing this.
So there's another, I don't want to derail, but I do use the HomePods. I use the HomePod minis at home quite a bit, and they're pretty cool to be able to have stereo wireless speakers connected to an Apple TV or whatever music I've got, and then have Siri throughout the home. But there's a holistic picture here of the headset you're wearing, talking to those speakers, and giving you all sorts of experiences. Like, you actually were the one who pointed this out to me, that there's like an audio mapping technology that Apple has built into some of its systems. Can you break that down for the audience out there that might not be aware what that is and how that works? Because I think that's the Apple advantage, is if you dive deep into their ecosystem, you actually get tons of benefits that others won't necessarily get just going at it piecemeal. And you've been kind of really interesting. You've been pointing out this idea that what would happen if Apple shipped a headset without built-in audio? What if they tried to cut the weight off of this so much that you have to like attach the audio a different way, as through AirPods or otherwise? Well, how do you walk through a home and have Siri answer your questions or whatnot in low latency in a way that feels good, is going to be a really, really interesting question. But break down that audio mapping technology.
Yeah, that's something that is on Apple's HomePods and on Vision Pro, actually, with these audio pods. So they do this audio ray tracing thing where they send out like a low frequency signal, and then they use the microphones to record how that diffracts as it goes around the room, reflects, sorry. And then that's actually been something that's on some other products as well. The Google Home Max, which is now discontinued, actually introduced this back in, don't quote me on this, but something like 2017. And I think some of the other high-end speakers like Sonos explore this technology as well. So they basically have a rough map of your room that they can use to make it sound, to what's the word here, optimize the sound profile to better fit your room. And that's something that we haven't seen on any of the Quest headsets yet. but it's something that Meta could theoretically do with the room mesh that they get at some point.
Yeah, I think that's where I wanted to go with that. That's what I wanted to think about. And, you've got Thomas out there that we talked about earlier in the show, the developer of LaserDance. And I wonder about that whole home situation, right? Where Apple has you go scan your house. And then what can it do with that mesh to enhance the other services, the other OSs you have running around on Apple Silicon around your home? How does that benefit each other? What kind of great things might you be able to get out of that? Uh, there's a big opportunity for enhancing VR by giving you ambient audio. The one that the fantasy that I've always had in my brain that I always think about is there's the VR chat OSC controls, the audio protocol that they use to do all these crazy things inside of VR chat over your local network, where you don't have to like have so many privacy controls because it's all contained locally. Uh, Weather effects is the one I've always wondered about. I want to be in VR, and when the dragon comes flying overhead and breathes fire down on me, I want a gust of hot wind to hit me. And the only way that that ever gets to be real is when you've got all this like local devices talking to each other, so that that fan up there can blow that hot wind on me at the exact right moment in my VR experience. So that's the end goal, right? We want to get there. How do we work back from that to actual hardware we have in our homes?
Yeah, there were some specific devices for that back in the original Rift and Vive days, like a Kickstarter project. But it truly is fascinating to think about if you already have a fan, say you have one of those Dyson fans that can do hot and cold air, the idea of being able to just tap into that and have that be integrated would be very interesting with the hardware you already have in your home. And obviously, as Americans, you would all have some sort of air conditioning system typically that then you imagine possible integrations in there. So before we move on to the next Apple Vision Pro topic, there's one comment here that I really want to reply to, and it's from Francisco Pariona, who says, Vision Pro looks like a joke compared to Orion. Please go to uploadvr.com, scroll down, and read the article by me why Meta's Orion does not make headsets like Apple Vision Pro obsolete. I talked about this last week with Kyle, and we don't have time to go into it because we have a lot of topics to still get through. But the key thing here to understand is that Orion is a $10,000 prototype, and we probably will not get AR glasses with its field of view until perhaps the 2030s. Whereas Vision Pro is a product that exists today, is being sold for a third of the cost with a healthy margin, and is actually years outdated at this point. Vision Pro was originally supposed to come out in 2022. That's common knowledge by now. And so you're going to see mixed reality headsets get dramatically better over the second half of this decade, long before you see acceptable AR glasses. That was the kind of key quote I had in this article. Please do read it if you have that opinion. Incredible mixed reality headsets are going to arrive before acceptable AR glasses. So please keep that in mind when you're comparing Meta's $10,000 prototype that won't ship for years and years and years to Apple's consumer product that exists today.
Yeah, not the he said it, but you can read all of our coverage on uploadvr.com, where we are telling the same consistent story, and we have been for a very long time now, of the field of view of VR being pure magic. When you get above 90 degrees and you get up to 100 and plus, you end up feeling presence inside a virtual location. You end up transporting to the place that you're being shown. And go look at my article about Wind Up Minds, watching that experience switch from mixed reality to VR. You're not going to do that on AR glasses anytime soon because of the limited field of view. You will have augmented objects, things that look like they're present in your space. They're fully contained within the field of view, but transporting you to another place, that's the magic of these headsets right here. That's the magic that the developers in our audience are building left and right. And the field of view just gets wider, right, over time. We've had a decade here where devs, where engineers have taken the 100 degree field of view of the early Valve room and the early headset from Palmer Luckey, and they've turned it into a portable device. That's what 10 years of development have done to VR. It's now a portable. Everything you did 10 years ago in VR with a wire, you can now do now wireless, and that's 10 years of progress in the VR market. And we've got just a huge open space for us to go from there. Wait till we get haptics, right?
Yeah, I mean, I build on what you say, and it's not everything. It's more, right? It's back 10 years ago, you didn't have hand tracking, you didn't have color pass through, you didn't have room scale tracking. There was a time where, if we talk about 2014, people were amazed that the Oculus DK2 could positionally track your head in a pretty much desk size volume, right? So I could turn like this and go forward. But if I went a little bit up here, I would be out of the tracking volume. And I didn't have hands of any sort. I didn't have track controllers unless you bought these Razer Hydras, which were wired to a base station that would sit on your table. This sounds wild to anyone who is only recently in this industry. But the track controllers back then were wired, as in there was a cable going down, and it wasn't even a very long cable to a base station. So you sat at a table, you had a very small tracking range, and also if you turned completely around, your positional tracking would break because it was done by what was essentially a webcam clipped to the top of your monitor. So 10 years later, for for $500, right, you get something that is dramatically higher resolution, has inside out controller and head tracking that pretty much works anywhere, even on entire warehouse scales, with hand tracking that works without controllers, mixed reality pass through, room meshing. All of these things have happened in 10 years. So yeah, what's happened in the past 10 years has been really remarkable, to be honest.
Yep. Let's move on to this next subject under the Apple Vision Pro, because that is starting to move us into the future here on what could be in the next iteration of this $3,500 product line. So we expect cheaper, we expect lighter, but those things might not turn out to be true. I don't know. Apple is in a class by itself. I'm probably one of the few places. This show is probably one of the few places in the world where I pose the question of would we ever see a VR headset that is above the Apple Vision Pro's product line from Apple? Could you imagine an Apple Vision Pro Max sometime down the line that gives you varifocal optics and a dramatically different field of view? That's what I think we need to be thinking about here on this show when we think about the opportunity for VR headsets in the next few years. David, what is this Apple Vision Pro refresh supposed to be?
That is certainly a hot take. The idea of going above 3,500. I'll have to respectfully disagree on that one for any time soon. I think
VR headsets are cars.
Yeah, perhaps, but I don't think we're going to see anytime soon. I think Apple's going to look at the opposite direction. And so, to be clear, on this show, many times we've talked about the reports of Apple working on a cheaper and lighter non-Pro Vision headset, but today we're talking about something different. So yes, they are working on something that rumors suggest could land somewhere between 1,500 and 2,500, depending on where Apple manages to get the cost for a regular Vision headset. Could be called Apple Vision, could be called Apple Vision Air, but separately, they're also, according to this new supply chain report from Ming-Chi Kuo, who is generally somewhat quite reliable, depending on what topics he's talking about, saying that Apple plans a simpler Vision Pro refresh that essentially just takes the current Vision Pro and upgrades its M2 chip to the M5 chip. So that's a 3-generation jump there of chipsets. And this is supposed to enter mass production based on his supply chain sources at the end of next year, so around a year from now. And so the M5 chip does not exist yet, but what does exist is the M3 and M4. Vision Pro, as I mentioned before, shipped years later than it was supposed to. So a couple of months after it released, we saw M3 Max arrive. And then within like 6 months or so, we saw iPad Pro with M4. And Apple claims that the M4 has a 50% more powerful CPU and 4 times more powerful GPU than the M2. So if you imagine taking that even further with an M5, we could see a Vision Pro with dramatically improved computing power. And that could help from everything like the quality of pass-through that they're able to achieve. It could also help with things like the hand tracking, with the masking on your arm. There are a million different things that they could improve with that. So Quo claims that the supply chain for this M5 Vision Pro refresh will be mostly the same, and thus other hardware specs and designs won't change much, which should help lower costs and price points. But he said that he doesn't expect the price to change much, suggesting we're still talking about an expensive headset. So perhaps, reading between the lines here, we could see this refresh arrive at 3,000 instead of 3,500, maybe at the absolute best something like 2,500. And I expect we'll also see some other minor spec bumps here, probably higher resolution pass-through cameras, improved sensors, things like that. And we could even see better materials and design that bring the weight down as well. So we're not talking about like a dramatic next generation here, but this could eat away at some of the pain points that exist in Vision Pro. The other thing that this is supposed to do, according to Quo, which seems quite obvious, is bring Apple Intelligence to Vision headsets. And Quo is suggesting that won't only be in terms of voice, but also in terms of vision. So this headset will be able to do some understanding of your environment that is far beyond the current Vision Pro, and mix that in with Apple Intelligence to actually be useful in the ways that we've speculated that independent developers might do with Quest's pass-through API, and what we see Meta AI already doing on Quest 3 in some cases with the visual AI they have there.
Yeah, I think we need to just call out the copying that does happen, right? That like I'm seeing everyone debating prices and debating like where is the right mass market for Apple, and comparing it to the mass market for Meta. And I think it's only part of the picture. We talk so much about hardware, but I have to reiterate to our audience here that like Meta did something ingenious this year in the fact that they opened up the operating system at the same time that they packed all this extra power into a lower cost device. A lot of people out there are jaded, frustrated that Meta has pointed its entire business at children, at kids who are 10 to 16 years of age. That's what Meta has seemed to structure all of its efforts after.
I don't think the all is not accurate there. That's not accurate.
Well, all right. So that's where I'm getting at here is the software changes, the opening of the operating system is the part that isn't for those people. It isn't. It serves productivity to actually unlock the operating system. It serves being able to do a lot of the things that Apple Vision Pro does, because it's a fully realized operating system that brings in all these other things, right? So yeah, David's right that I misspoke there. I'm pointing out that the software here has opened up to allow productivity on a device that's just $300, and that's a mind-boggling entry into personal computing and to head-mounted displays. And so, yeah, that's not just about children. It's about a lot more than that, and you're getting that this year, too, out of the MetaQuest platform.
Yeah, I think Apple definitely will see some of their strategy adapt to the fact that Meta is providing, a decent chunk of the Vision Pro experience at literally a tenth of the price. Which is, that's a really interesting product proposition there. I don't expect we'll ever see Apple, start rushing to the bottom and start trying to ship a $500 Vision headset. I don't think that will happen anytime soon, not even in the foreseeable future. But what I do think we will see is that cheaper Vision headset that there's been so many rumors on now. There's just so many reports on it. Really focus on an aggressive price. And one of the things that we talked about a few weeks ago is that Apple seems to be considering using high-density regular OLED instead of micro OLED now to try and achieve that. And so that could really help them eventually, once that's ready for production, get a $1,500, a $1,200, maybe even this may be a bit optimistic, $1,000 Vision headset. And at that point, that's when you really could see Apple start being competitive, because we've seen time and time again, Apple can sell the same volume as its competitors at double the price, not at 10 times the price, but at double the price because of its brand power, because of the kind of value that people see out of the Apple ecosystem and the polish that they put into their operating system and their other, unique selling points, I could see a $1,200 Vision headset selling as well as a $500 Quest headset if it happens.
Yeah, interesting comments as everyone sort of debates and tries to understand how everything is laid out here, understanding the space for laptops. I do want to call out the comment mentioning the Godot engine on a Quest. That's what I'm trying to get across, and I think, David, you I appreciate you pushing back at me. It's going to break brains when you see a 15-year-old code an entire VR game directly in their headset, and that game hits headsets worldwide, millions of headsets that they can reach with that piece of software. And that piece of software was never conceived, shown, thought of, ever touched a traditional display. It was conceived and written and taken to headsets worldwide directly from inside a VR headset. And our audience knows that it's going to be this new generation operating that way. But I think I'm trying to convey that you're an adult. You've been coding for 20 years on your flat screen display. You've got a triple monitor setup. It's still useful to you to put on this headset and do all that work inside headset. You haven't missed it. So we can still get there.
Yeah. Craig Melville pointing out Meta is not unlocking its OS; it's just opening up to partners. Yeah, that's something I think you may have misspoke there, and you said like opening up. They're letting other companies use it. It's still a proprietary operating system. That there's not open source. There's no ability to hook in to it. There's nothing has changed in that regard.
That's something we're going to have to follow. We're going to have to see if Meta follows through on its promises, but. You can see Meta, that this partnership relationship, it only works if they're making certain behind the scenes agreements as to the future of their platforms and how open they are. Like you saw, Tim Sweeney come out and praise Meta for an open system.
Yeah, that's so an open store. That's not an operating system. It's what he was praising for, and I think what you're talking about is the Horizon Store is open, but it's no more open than the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. It's just that they've changed from a console.
Unknown Sources is a little bit more open.
Sure. Well, so as a platform level, that's no different than an Android phone, right? And getting a Pixel phone, you can install on unknown sources. On a Samsung phone, you can install unknown sources. And on a Meta headset, you can install unknown sources. It doesn't make it. It's not open source, but you're right to say that it's significantly more open than Vision OS, where you can't sideload unless it's your own app that you've compiled yourself.
Yeah, sorry if I said open source. I did not mean that. I meant generally open as this overall philosophical thing that they're trying to
it's
at least
definitely
convince
more
people
open,
of.
Right? It is like the store is becoming more open. The ecosystem in a wider sense in terms of these headsets. We had a comment asking, was there any tease of the third-party headsets at Connect? No, but we did see Andrew Bosworth, the CTO of Meta, when asked about this on Instagram, said that, or seemed to say that he wants that to be for those headset makers to do. So he doesn't want to steal their thunder. He wants them to be the ones to announce it. So keep an eye on Asus and Lenovo, as we will be keeping an eye on them for announcements on that.
Guy saying that the only open OS today is Windows and or Linux. So anyways, and thank you for Onakazi for defending me there on my the way I spoke about that. Let's move on to this last Apple Vision Pro subject, because what's more open than booting a WebView app off of the App Store?
Yeah, this is a interesting one. So we referenced this at the very, very start of the show, and I'm just looking for the image here now if I can find it. But there was a third-party YouTube app on the Vision OS App Store, and now there no longer is. So I'll just walk through the context of this here. This is a $5 app that a lot of people really appreciated. It's crazy that I have to keep forcing myself to say was instead of is. It's almost surreal to see this is taken down. This was an app I used on Vision Pro. For context, there is no YouTube app on Vision Pro today. You can go through Safari like you can on any web browser and access YouTube, but there is no native app, and YouTube opted out of making their iPad app available. So Christian Selig, the same developer of Apollo for Reddit, if you use that or were aware of that, another app which ironically was taken down at the request of the platform holder, in that case, Reddit, developed this Juno. It was much loved. It was a very highly rated app on the App Store, $5. But back in April, he got an email from YouTube saying that he had violated and continued to violate the YouTube terms of service and YouTube API terms of service by modifying the YouTube web interface, as well as saying that Juno strongly alludes to YouTube's trademarks and iconography. The email demanded that he update Juno such that it ceased to modify the YouTube service. So Selig said that he found this puzzling. I'll actually bring up the email now so that our desktop viewers at the very least can see it. Apologies if mobile people cannot. But he said he found this puzzling because he doesn't use the YouTube API. Juno is essentially just reskinning the web version of YouTube and putting it into a nice container with a nice little Vision OS menu system and Vision OS player controls. And he also points out that Google's own Chrome browser allows extensions to change the style of websites, right? He's just changing the style of a website, including YouTube. You can make a Chrome extension that changes the style of YouTube. They also, were annoyed at the fact that he used the YouTube embed player. So he updated it a few months ago to not use that anymore. But he also points out that YouTube's own iOS developer sample uses the embed technique. So that's a really weird one. He also says that he doesn't really know what they mean by the whole iconography thing, right? So there used to be on the home pane of Juno, the YouTube logo at the top, but only because YouTube has that on their page, right? So he even updated the app to hide that on purpose, right? So it was part of his style retheming. It would hide the YouTube icon. He added unofficial to his title and description in the App Store. And he responded to YouTube, within very, very short amount of time, saying all this and committing to all this. And he released that update. And it looks like YouTube just completely ignored him because they emailed Apple, according to this developer. YouTube emailed Apple with the exact same claims over again, just, the classic big company brick wall, like a robot, no response, making the exact same claims. And Apple took YouTube's side and took it off the App Store. So the developer has a quote here I'll read out where they said, Juno was a fun hobby project for me to build. As a developer, I wanted to get some experience building for Vision Pro, and as a user, I wanted a nice way to watch YouTube on this cool new device. As a result, I really enjoyed building Juno, but it was always something that I saw as fundamentally an app built for fun. Because of that, I have zero desire to spin this into a massive fight akin to what happened with Reddit years ago. That's the opposite of fun. I hope that's understandable. For those who have Juno, to my knowledge, it should continue to work fine unless the YouTube website updates in some fashion that breaks stuff. Sorry that it had to end this way. I had some really cool stuff planned that I think would have been a lot of fun. It's genuinely awesome hearing all the kind words from Vision Pro users who have loved the app. And then a little salute emoji, which I guess means just, peace out. So there you go.
I like our comments. I love you, our commenters here, with Ross saying, I, for one, worship our tech overlords. They know what is best, and I love their version of freedom with a trademark. So that is a very sarcastic comment, and I love it. And then Mr. Mycelium saying, it seems like Google just doesn't want YouTube on Apple Vision Pro. Apple has spurned too many of the other tech companies for their privacy policies. Now that they've launched a new product, it's biting them in the butt.
So,
talk about the app.
Yeah, YouTube did confirm, and we reported on this back when Vision Pro launched, that they have a Vision Pro app on their roadmap. What that means in terms of, have they started it? Is this coming, 3 years from now or anytime soon? We don't know, but they do claim they have one on their roadmap. A lot of people here in the comments are drawing, a few people in the comments are drawing comparisons to the way Meta used to be with their store. For example, taking down Guy Godin's virtual desktop's PC VR streaming feature before then adding it back in when they released Airlink. That was obviously a very different era of Meta compared to what we have now. But I wonder, we have Guy Godin, the developer of Virtual Desktop, in our comments. I wonder if you have any thoughts of this as a developer who's pushed up against the app stores of big tech companies. Do you have any thoughts of this happening on the Apple platform as well?
Yeah, I think we'll get into that when we move in. Like we'll look for his comments and read it out as we move into the last section. I want to throw out really off the wall ideas because I love the comment here from the person Mr. Mycelium talking about Google just not wanting that. Um, these companies are playing platform games that we can barely grasp, and it's very frustrating. Remember, if you had an app on iPad or iPhone, you had to uncheck a check mark to pull that app off of the Apple Vision Pro's system. So Apple played a game there where they basically said to all developers, you're good. You just get in there and we're gonna do the same story of taking our existing stuff and throw it into VR and throw it into our Vision OS platform. And there's plenty of reasons devs need to uncheck that check mark because of various reasons. That the app just won't work because they're using some strange way of interacting that is abnormal, and that's Google what we all want is co-watching. It's all we've ever wanted for years. But the platforms need to make friends with Hollywood in order to in order for those things to be available everywhere. That means digital rights management. That means counting how many people are in the room. Those are all the things that are pushing in the face of this rollout across platforms, and that's the battle that these companies are playing at the highest levels.
I guess that brings us into the last piece of context we should add here, which is that, yeah, YouTube does have an app on Quest. And this week, they're supposed to start the co-watching beta, right? It was announced at Connect as a beta starting this week. They showed this screenshot of, these are the new Meta avatars in Horizon Home watching YouTube. It's Thursday, so I don't know. Is this going to drop tomorrow? Is this going to? It wouldn't be the first thing Meta's announced that is released a lot later. And the irony is, this was announced 2 years ago,
Yeah,
and we
well,
were saying finally in our headline, right? And it's, I mean, maybe it drops tomorrow, right?
I mean, and there you go, right? Okay, how do you co-op? How does David Heaney and I, how do we, me and an Apple Vision Pro, him in a Quest 3, go and watch the same YouTube videos synced up at the same time? Or like how does that work? It's a tale as old as time. um Digging back into the recesses of my brain and going back into history books, I do recall, I believe Mark Zuckerberg went to meet Steve Jobs face to face back when they were talking about putting Facebook into the iOS ecosystem. And there was this famous, if you go back and find the video, there are screenshots showing Facebook like in the operating system. But what happened was, as I recall, I could be misremembering, they had like a handshake agreement to add Facebook into the operating system of iOS. And then when they got actually down to the nitty gritty details, they disagreed on which APIs to use at that fundamental layer of the operating system, with Facebook essentially wanting to get its mitts into iOS at that layer, and Steve Jobs telling him no. And when I see Mark Zuckerberg wearing a Caesar shirt, with an ancient dead language up on MetaConnect that says, this is all me and this is my future, what I see is him continuing that journey that he fought 15 years ago on iOS to achieve.
Yeah, I think we're almost ready to move on to Microsoft now. Arlen is pointing out in the comments that the big screen app lets you do YouTube co-watching. It's also something that people do in VR chats. So to be clear, we're just talking about this happening on like a system level. So you're in a party, you're in home, you haven't launched any immersive app, and you just have these in front of you. Also on Vision OS, you can do co-watching with a lot of different experiences through its built-in screen sharing feature, right? They have this like built-in co-presence where I can just share my Safari window with you. So you can kind of already do this stuff, but it's not exactly ideal. And that's more just like screen sharing. It's not a sort of polished feature. Are we ready to move on to Microsoft?
Yep, this is going to be a nice little discussion as we lament what has happened to Microsoft and the history of Windows MR. If you've owned a Windows MR
Well,
headset over the years, what?
Sorry, I think we're starting with HoloLens, or are you just kind of doing a general overview?
I'm just going to do
Sure.
a general comment. I would love to hear if you owned a Windows MR headset over the years. Let us know in the comments what it was, what games you used in it, what was your experience. I would love to see some of that reminiscing because from here on out, we're not going to be talking about it a whole lot. David, what do we got?
Yeah, so we're two Microsoft stories here. As Ian's pointed out, we'll finish by talking about Windows MR headsets. But first, HoloLens 2. So after around, 5 years now, HoloLens 2 production has ended. Microsoft confirmed to UploadVR. We got the scoop on that HoloLens 2 production has ended. And it will receive updates to address critical security issues and software regressions until the end of 2027. So as soon as 2028 starts, HoloLens 2 will no longer be a software-supported device. And the original HoloLens 1, its software support will end this year on December 10th. Production of it ended years ago, back in 2018. So they are killing off the HoloLens line. There is no replacement announced, nor are there any reports suggesting that there is a direct replacement for HoloLens coming up. So Microsoft is exiting the enterprise and general AR market. However, we should point out, as we pointed out at the start of the show, that they do continue to push forward on their HoloLens IVAS. So they did confirm that to us, that they are still committed to it. And that's what we've seen in all of these reports, where Microsoft has been laying off people from its AR VR division for multiple years in a row, except for that militarized HoloLens IVAS, which they, as far as I'm aware, even continue to hire people for, as that is still an ongoing contract. It's worth billions of dollars potentially. And as I pointed out when we talked about the Palmer Luckey story at the start, IVAS is going to get a company level test by the US Army next year. So this is the latest version of it. It's like they continued with HoloLens hardware over time. This thing actually does have an impressive field of view. The original IVAS, which you see here, actually had like an Orion level field of view. And it's obviously a lot bulkier and bigger, but they decided, for the sake of like ergonomics and comfort and practicality, to actually update it to be sleeker and smaller and then narrower, but it's still better than HoloLens 2, right? They continued with AR hardware development, just only in the context of this militarized version.
All right. Well, yeah, I think we talked about it earlier in the show, and everyone in the comments is talking about the next subject. Is there anything else you want to talk about here before we move on to it?
Yeah, I just say on the context of HoloLens itself, this thing did own the enterprise AR market for years. This came out in 2019. At the time, pass-through headsets were still years out, right? There were no practical pass-through headsets. Even Vario with their XR3, that only happened the next year. So you could get like a high-resolution pass-through headset for thousands and thousands of dollars. This was the only game in town for a while. Pretty much right as it launched, Magic Leap then pivoted to enterprise. They built a lot of enterprise software for the Magic Leap 1, and then they came out with Magic Leap 2. And Magic Leap 2 is fully focused on enterprise. It is essentially, in many ways, eating HoloLens 2's lunch, but that's because it came out 3 years later, right? Microsoft didn't come out with a HoloLens 3. And right now, the only company that's kind of serving this specific market of transparent enterprise AR is Magic Leap. And so we'll have to follow its progression. As you know, we've seen a lot of reports about Magic Leap's future and how it's kind of trying to turn into a technology provider, not a headset maker. You know, they're not going to make more headsets themselves. So we could soon be in a future where there is actually no option for transparent optical AR, and a lot of that is around what we've been talking about. You know, for enterprise, I'm speaking about no option for this kind of thing. It is the rise of pass-through headsets in some ways, Apple Vision Pro, Quest 3, and the headsets we're going to see over the next few years that push pass-through to higher quality. And it's also Microsoft, we'll talk about this in the next section as well, but Microsoft transitioning from being a hardware maker in this space to providing software as part of a partnership with Meta.
Yeah, and I think what David just kind of alluded to just in a passing comment, this is the last, right? Like Magic Leap 2 has disappeared from the market.
Well, no, it's still sold. They just confirmed they're not going to make a Magic Leap 3.
Yeah, well, and okay, so David's saying this is exiting the market, and what that makes me wonder, all those people, all of you in our audience are wondering, like I see it in just a recurring question: is Apple Vision Pro a dead end? Is Apple going to pull out of that just like the Quest Pro did? And I think it's such a misreading of what we're actually seeing go on. You saw Apple, one of the biggest tech companies on the planet, come out and say, this is our strategy going forward. We are all in on VR headsets with pass-through on them, and we're starting off at $3,500. And all that says to me is a whole bunch of executives across the entire landscape have had to go make those emails to their competitors that they didn't want to send a couple weeks before and say, look, we got to do it. We got to find a new path forward here. We got to find a way for us to make these platforms work together because Apple is coming for it all. And that's why I think it's such a misreading of this whole market to not think that Apple has put its marker in the sand and said, we're going to own this space and we're going to eke out from it. We did it we did it from iPod. We moved out from the core iPod into a whole bunch of different iPods. We started off with an iPhone. We moved into a whole bunch of different iPhones. Apple has sent that message to the entire market that that's what they're doing here with Apple Vision Pro. And one by one, we've seen these things die off now. Magic Leap going away, HoloLens going away, and these ideas that were always too far away from consumer readiness are still far away from consumer readiness.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Ian. It's a complete. The people who say that pass-through is a dead end and that optical see-through is the future are just insanely wrong. You're the opposite of right. What we're seeing here in this trend is that the optical stack.
I had my mute on for the laughter there, but I need to give it to you. I did the mute off so that I could laugh for our audience. I hope you are laughing along with David here. The opposite of right, is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah. Gosh. The idea that some people come out with this take that pass through, using cameras on the front of a VR headset to show you the real world is the dead end. Pass-through's only just started. You're only seeing the first generation. What we're going to see in the next few years, pass-through is going to get so much better than the naysayers think. You're going to get, I could easily see by the end of this decade getting to that visual Turing test where someone with typical eyesight puts on a pass-through headset and they can't tell the difference between it being a transparent optic, where a normie who's not into technology puts this thing on and literally has no idea until you inform them that this is a camera passing through the real world.
The one thing that Orion and Apple Vision Pro have in common is that it's in the best interests of the tech company shipping the product to not tell you the correct, to not educate you on this very subject that David and I are unfolding for you. So sorry, David, I just needed to say that they're not educating you. We're trying to do our best, and you're on the right track here by watching us. So David, what do we got next?
Yeah, I was just going to say that is why I wrote that editorial that I really recommend people go and read, if I do say so myself, about why Orion doesn't mean that headsets like Vision Pro are a dead end. In fact, it's just a complete wrong reading. If you have seen, a certain news website or analyst say that, stop reading them because they don't know what they're talking about. And actually, Apple Vision Pro has seen a lot of success in enterprise. It's one of the areas where Apple is seeing some of its biggest growth. You have some of these apps that are able to present, these really high quality CAD visualizations or modeling tools. If you're building anything from a Formula One car to a jet engine, being able to stand around with people and visualize it in 3D space with 4K micro OLED displays where you can see every little detail. And you're seeing these things as fully opaque, not transparent holograms. What the problem with Orion is, and I really don't want to get too off track, we've said this over and over, while it is remarkable technology, we are not saying it's not impressive. It is truly a marvel to behold. It really sets amongst people who don't understand where it is in terms of how long that is away from being a product, it gives a very false expectation of where we are today. And yeah, I just want to keep saying that the reason that HoloLens 2 is being discontinued, the reason it's not getting a replacement, the reason you're not going to see a Magic Leap 3, all of these are the same reason. Pass-through is by far the most promising technology for the next 5 years, not see-through.
Whew, that's fun to hear. I love it. I hope you loved hearing it out there in our audience, and hold us to our words on this one. Right? We don't try to predict the future, and this is one area where like we can't not try to point out the overall direction of our reporting, every piece of evidence we have, pointing all in the same direction towards the future. So, we'll accept alternative, we'll accept the facts as we see them when we get information that points us in a different direction, but we don't have that information. All we see is Magic Leap fall on its face as we expected them to for years. We see HoloLens fall on its face as we expected it to for years. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. I like Onakazi. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. That's Billy Madison, and that does feel very on point for how it feels to read a number of those takes out there. Let's move on to Windows Mixed Reality here, David.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've facepalmed so much in the past week reading some of the popular takes on Orion and what it means for Vision Pro, but you're just right, Ian. Let's move on to our final topic, Windows Mixed Reality, the other Microsoft news. This is obviously a very confusing topic in some ways to talk about, for the simple fact that these headsets started shipping in 2017 on a PC-based platform where these were wired plug into your PC headsets called Windows Mixed Reality. But these were not mixed reality headsets in the sense we use today. These are VR headsets. They were used almost entirely for virtual reality, entirely immersive, except for this one little flashlight feature Microsoft released where you could put out your controller and create a little circular portal of the black and white pass-through of these headsets. So for that reason, we always try to use Windows MR, because these are Windows MR VR headsets. And the news here, if you missed it, is that the latest version of Windows 11, the latest major version, kills support for them. So this isn't completely unexpected. Microsoft did announce this a few months ago, and we did report it on at the time, but what we didn't know is what this really meant. Did it mean that you couldn't use them on Steam, or that you just couldn't use them on Microsoft's own first-party software? The answer is that it kills them completely. If you update to the major yearly release of Windows 11 that just came out, and you have one of these headsets, including the HP Reverb G2, which released in 2020, and we know people that still use, it will not work. You will not be able to use it. It will be a paperweight unless you use it on a different computer that has an older version of Windows. And in the data we showed earlier from the Steam hardware survey, around 3.5% of Steam VR users were still using one of these headsets, which we estimate to be around 80,000 people. Now, the question that you may wonder is, what if you don't update to that Windows 11 version? Microsoft has a statement for this. It's not very clear, but this is their statement. Existing Windows Mixed Reality devices will continue to work with Steam through November 2026 if users remain on the old version of Windows 11 and do not upgrade to this year's annual feature update. So we don't know what happens after November 2026, but it's possible that the software will then not work at all, rendering these paperweights on pretty much anything, right?
Yeah, so a lot of people, I made that request out earlier to hear about what headsets you had. I saw Odysseys mentioned, and I saw a lot of Reverb G2s mentioned. Some people still sporting those out there. Also seeing people just ravage the controllers that Windows shipped with these things. I remember getting the first image of the controllers. UploadVR had the first image of the controllers for those things back in the day, when Microsoft finally showed these controllers that had a half-in solution, right? They had both the stick and the thumb pad. They felt a little awkward in your hand. Is that right? That they had both the stick and the thumb pad? I can't remember.
Yes, they did, yeah.
Um, so and they felt cheap in your hand, and they didn't feel super great. They had the tracking rings on top, and oh goodness. And I see the commenter mentioning that they went into the Halo shooting gallery experience. I went and found that on our YouTube channel. You can find Halo Recruit. For the people that aren't familiar, you go into, you get to play Halo. You could play Halo in Windows Mixed Reality with a little asterisk in the corner. And the asterisk was that you pick up the guns and you point them at a flat screen in VR over there, and you shoot at target practice at this little flat screen that's over on the other room. And it was so bad. It was so stupid. And I saw one of the commenters being like, that's all I tried from that store, and I was done. And I love that. Like that was the effort that Microsoft put into this. Was like someone at Microsoft, the head of the division probably said, let's get Halo in here in a cheap little way and be done with it. And it was such a miss. It was such a fail.
Yeah, exactly. Their first party content here was pretty woeful when it came to gaming and entertainment. And they did have some interesting ideas with their Windows MR Home. They had the ability to like move around your windows in a 3D space and position them and pin them on the wall years before we saw some of that stuff arrive on other platforms. But most people use this on Steam, right? There was a Steam VR driver, and that's why it's so shocking that this Windows 11 update doesn't just kill on the Windows Store. This killed the ability to use them on Steam. And as Don Hopper found when he tested this out, Steam still detects that you have a headset via USB and tells you to install the driver for it, and sort of directs you to the Steam VR driver. But then you launch Steam VR and it doesn't work. And in Microsoft's own software, this is the message you get, as Don Hopper, our colleague, found out. So a pretty wild decision. But on Windows MR in general, in theory, this was such a great idea, right? It was, you have these separate systems, the Oculus system, and then you have the HTC Vive and Steam VR system, and we're going to come along, the maker of the operating system that these headsets are running on, and provide OS level support for VR. And then it's going to be a bunch of different makers. You're going to have all of these, Asus and HP and Acer and Dell and Lenovo, and it's going to be, this is going to be the standard. And we have inside-out tracking, right? You don't even need base stations and for the headset and controllers. And then Samsung even is going to come along and make one with OLED. And in theory, right, this wins. In practice, the devil is in the details. And this really does show is a great example of how a great idea and something that sounds great in theory can be executed horribly. So the first problem was that, yes, Microsoft was the first to inside-out tracking for headset and controllers, right? They beat the Quest, right? Some people think that Rift At and Quest introduced this. No, they didn't. Microsoft did with these. The problem is, when Rift S and Quest came along, they had 4 cameras in the corner, so you had this really wide tracking range. If you may, as an enthusiast, think that isn't wide enough for you. Well, these things with these 2 cameras on the front, the controller tracking range was pretty woeful, right? You could easily lose out, and it was to the point where there were key major Steam VR games that people were playing that you just could not practically be competitive with here. The other thing is that these had like these kind of cheap, low quality lenses, and as Ian pointed out, the controllers felt like someone said, "How do I make a VR controller for as cheap as possible?" It literally felt like that was their design goal. And then they didn't have in headset boundary setup. It was still, you had to like carry your headset around the room to set up a boundary. All of these little things combined with the fact that Microsoft didn't have any serious first party content push, just meant that these failed. And there was a good one that came along, right? The Samsung ones were good. The Odyssey headsets, they had these OLED panels, they had built-in audio. Still, tracking was compromised. You finally had one that wasn't a compromised piece of hardware with the Reverb G2. It was the first good Windows MR headset. By then it was too late. And the Reverb G2, it had the 4 cameras, it had higher quality controllers, it had 2K displays that are still higher resolution than Quest 3 today, and a comfortable design that people loved. It was just too late by then. The brand trust there in Windows MR had died out, and Quest headsets were coming along that were providing a great PC experience wirelessly.
Yeah, thank you to Davin for tuning in, and thank you to all of our viewers here. I want to take one last look at this image before it fades into our memory. And then, David, I wanted to make you a request before we sign off on this episode to pull up that Steam survey image if you can as our last thing today. I don't know if you're doing something else, but I want to bring up the Steam hardware survey again when we close out our episode here, because I'm seeing the questions in our audience, and we have put these questions to Valve. I'm in their emails trying to ask this question. If you look at this number, you see Windows Mixed Reality here at 3.5% of the Steam hardware survey. That is a number we would expect to go down as people upgrade to Windows 11 and these headsets go offline. The question is, what's going to happen and how can it happen? And there's architecturally, like, I had this discussion last night on Twitter with a person who didn't really understand. The Index has cameras. There's cameras on the Index, the Valve Index, and there's cameras on these Windows MR headsets. A lay viewer may not understand that there's a fundamental difference in technology there, that from 2016 onward, from the Vive and all the SteamVR tracking ecosystem, you had a tracking system that would work in the dark. You had a tracking system that did not matter if you had a single light on in the room, and you were always in your VR experience. It always worked. And that wouldn't have worked if Valve had chosen computer vision. They couldn't get computer vision out that was the high enough quality for tracking on the time scale they wanted to beat Oculus to market. And so you have a lot of these headsets using this SteamVR tracking system that works even in the dark. Remember OLED, decisions like OLED were made back in the 2016 period, giving you a real dark black background for a lot of your VR experiences. Those are things that were walked back by Windows Mixed Reality, right? Trying to achieve a lower price back in the day. The question that I put to Valve is, are you going to do anything to help these Windows Mixed Reality people be online? And I so remember this one comment that happened back in 2019 when Valve invited me out to see the Index for the first time. And I'm like asking about the computer vision. And one of the Valve people starts speaking to me and starts saying, yeah, we understand the value of computer vision, and like the people next to them, the Valve people next to him stopped him from continuing, stopped him from talking to me and going off about computer vision and the benefits of it. But I'm laying it out for you, right? Computer vision doesn't work so well in the dark right now. And you have various limitations happening on these headsets. Well, all these great Index headsets up there at the top of this list, they don't have that problem. The Vive, they don't have that problem. And the question is Valve going to get there with computer vision? Are they going to supply computer vision to anyone else? Are they going to build any kind of computer vision-based technology to bring? Because, if you really wanted to open up this ecosystem, you could really, you could hack together your own HMD and tack on computer vision of an open source sort to bring your system online. And that feels like a very Valve route, is to somehow get a driver and computer vision attached to Windows Mixed Reality and get that stuff up and running in Linux, or let these headsets die. But I know that there's people out there hoping Valve would do this, and we are asking them.
Yeah, so there's about 3 or 4 different things there to address. Some very, very interesting thoughts there. The first is, when it comes to tracking in the dark, we have Alexi in the comments pointing out that Apple Vision Pro works in the dark with its infrared LED illuminator. Quest 3S, remarkably, the cheaper headset, actually has IR illuminators on the front. So when we go to review it, that's something we'll be really looking into. I actually find that my Quest 3 today tracks really well in almost darkness. Obviously not pitch black, but I've been in a room where I can barely see anything and my Quest's tracking pretty much perfectly. So I think that's slowly being solved. But the bigger question here is, of course, is there a path for these Windows MR headsets to not be paperweight? And could that be Valve? Could it be a community project that creates some sort of open source driver for this? We're looking into this, and I'm talking to some people at the moment who have a deep technical understanding of this. But my initial understanding based on these conversations is that with Windows MR, a lot of the core software was actually built into Windows, and these headsets are actually talking in some ways to the core Windows display manager that's built into the deep core of the OS. And without that, on Windows at least, it's very unlikely that you may be able to get these headsets still working. Now, there are people who are geniuses at solving problems like these and tricking the hardware into thinking that it's talking to certain services, and I'm sure we'll see some interesting avenue there. I would point out today you can do this on Linux. There are people who have already made open source Windows MR drivers for Linux, but that's obviously less effort than just installing an older version of Windows, right? At that point, why not just use Windows 10 or something? And obviously, the vast majority of VR content is not available on Linux.
Well, I think that's probably it for our show today. I do want to call out Mr. Mycelium's comment because I think they're joking, but I also love it. That's the real reason VR is having trouble taking off. It's because kids can't use them in the dark when they're supposed to be sleeping. I like it. I like that thought. Good note for us to leave this show off on for this week. Thank you to David for the incredible work this last week. Henry Stockdale out there, Don Hopper, Beck, Kyle, all of our subscribers, members, patrons supporting us in the work that we do. We thank you for being on this journey with us. We'll see you in the future.
Thanks so much, everyone. The great quality of the comments here. I love one comment here that went, wow, Sony PlayStation VR 2 is at 2.39. Yeah, that was a topic earlier in the show. So make sure you listen to this after broadcast and you can come back to that.
No, you did not miss any comments on the immersed visor. I've got to get a write-up about seeing it late last week out in front of our audience. So that is very much a discussion we're likely to get into next week. So
we discussed it last week, to be clear. If you want to go back and watch last week's show, Kyle and I went into that for quite a while.
But we don't recommend putting in a pre-order there still. We recommend waiting and seeing what happens. But we'll have that in an article very soon. Thank you so much. We'll see you.
Thanks, everyone.